Since 2005, BlueHat has been where the security research community and Microsoft come together as peers.
To debate and discuss, share and challenge, celebrate and learn.
On the BlueHat Podcast, join me, Nic Fillingham.
And me, Wendy Zenone, for conversations with researchers, responders, and industry leaders, both inside and outside of Microsoft.
Working to secure the planet's technology and create a safer world for all.
And now, on with the BlueHat Podcast.
Welcome to the BlueHat Podcast. Cameron, Vincent. Cam, thanks for joining us. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, Secretly Hidden is your Twitter handle. Do you use that handle broadly, or have I just doxed you?
I do use it. I don't use it to the point where I'm tweeting every other day. But the reason I created that Twitter was because when I was first participating in the Microsoft program, you send in your name and then a LinkedIn or Twitter. And I wanted to have something that proved because easily someone would be like, oh, well, you're not the Cameron Vincent on that list. And I'm like, well, here's the Twitter. And a fun story with that was one time I was out and I was actually talking to this girl and I was kind of bragging about me being on the list. And she's like, that's not you. And she made me tweet her name on the Twitter to verify it was me. So that's mainly why I did it. I needed proof that it was me. So I do use it, but not. You
needed proof when you were out socializing in your free time.
That's one scenario, but the other.
So if we go through your Twitter feed, your history, is there just a random person's name?
I deleted them.
You deleted
it.
Man.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit. You're joining us on the BlueHat Podcast because you presented at BlueHat 2023. Thank you so much for doing that. The recording is up on YouTube. We'll make sure there's a link in the show notes. And you're here on the podcast today to talk to us about that session, about that content, and about your experience with BlueHat. For folks that have heard your name, have seen you present at other conferences, they'll know who Secretly Hidden is. But for those that haven't, can you give us a little bit of an introduction? Who is Cam Vincent? Who is Secretly Hidden?
Sure. So, well, you know my name, obviously now, and I used to be a full-time bug bounty hunter, and it's what led me to being right here at this podcast right now. I participated in Microsoft's program pretty significantly to the point where I did it full-time for many years. And then about almost 2 years ago, I joined Microsoft officially, and it's been one of the best decisions I've made. I really love being at Microsoft and everyone I work with, being able to do a podcast like this. And, the Blue Hat event was awesome. If you watched my talk, the first Blue Hat I went to was 2017 and it was crazy. I was reminiscing, I never thought I'd be there years later in presenting. So the event was awesome. And I really just love everybody that I get to meet and hang out with. So yeah, that's, kind of where I'm at now.
And Cam, what is your role now at Microsoft? What are you currently employed to do?
So I work in the Microsoft Security Response Center, and it's quite interesting. I work on the team now that reviews reports coming in from external researchers. So before I was on the other side, sending those reports into that team, and now I'm actually reading them and reviewing them. And we also have our own little, research projects on the side.
I know, Cameron, you and I have chatted on the side before on some of these subjects, and you were saying that when you were a researcher, you would, you could see so many things, you learned so many things, but you didn't realize how much more and more interesting it is being on the internal side. Does that still hold true now that you're an old hat here, been here a long time?
I tell people I've learned more being at Microsoft the last year and a half than I did doing bug bounty full time the last 6-7 years, because it just, one, you're around some of the, very, very smart individuals. So that, of course, really helps. I get to work with very, very smart people. And it's just the crowd, right? If I have a question, the issue with the bug bounty game is it's kind of like a lone wolf game a little bit. Generally, you don't want to get duplicates with someone because essentially, it's first come, first serve. I have seen bug bounty hunters collab a lot and there are events, but it's a very isolated game. And that's one reason I kind of was done with doing it full time and being able to if I have a question, I can just ping anyone and everybody's so responsive and I get to learn from them. So it still is definitely, the learning experience here is incredible.
Cam, how would you sort of describe your scope of expertise? Where do you spend your time? Where have you spent your time? And how do you sort of classify yourself in this space?
So I started in web application, but it's when I was a young kid, I was actually doing hardware hacking. I would like hack the Xbox because I liked playing Call of Duty modded.
The original Xbox One?
No, the 360. That's to the point where like I convinced my dad one time to buy me a second one. I don't remember the reason I gave him, but he did it. And oh man, if they came in my room, because I had ripped that thing apart, I just ripped it apart trying to like mod it and hack it. And I did eventually do some little cool things to it. But yep. And then from there, I kind of got into web application as I got older. And that's where like my expertise is. I really enjoy web application hacking. I'm trying to learn like reverse engineering now. And that's why being at Microsoft's awesome, is because I know some very smart individuals who do reverse engineering. And they've said if I have any questions, they'd be willing to help. So that's kind of like where I'm at right now.
You said 17 was your first foray into breaking things apart and trying to figure it out.
So when I broke up the Xbox 360 and modded it, I was in the 6th grade. I was very young. Yeah, I don't even remember how old I was. Maybe it was at 12 years old or something.
How did you even think at 12, if I crack this thing open physically, I might be able to do things to it to allow me to get, I don't know, no clipping turned on in Call of Duty, or I don't know what you're trying to do. I haven't played a game since Doom, so I don't know what the actual.
It was I was in a game once and this guy turned into a car. He's like. Yeah, he's like, it was Nazi zombies like Call of Duty, and he's like running around as a car. And I was like, how did he do that? And he showed me a YouTube video. So then I like watched the video, and then I wanted my own Xbox so I could try to mod it and do the same exact thing. So that's kind of like how I got into it originally.
I remember in the first Xbox, you basically had to, if you wanted to mod a console until they had the software vulnerability sort of hacks, you had to like put your own BIOS. You had to like take off. You didn't take the old BIOS off. I think you bypassed it with a chip that sat on top of it, and then you sort of ran a modified BIOS through it. Is that what you were doing for Xbox 360? And then you were opening up like a console on the back end and uploading your own models, or how'd that work?
So the 360 one was interesting. So there were two ways you could modify it. One was called hot swapping. And I know we work for Microsoft right now, but this was a hilarious mod. What you did
for the next 45 minutes anyway.
you took apart the 360, right? And what would happen is this was the first time they introduced the ability to install your game to the hard drive. So it didn't have to just constantly be spinning the disk. Well, someone figured out a way where you'd put like the legit disk in, right? And it would like run a check saying, okay, is this a legit, Call of Duty disk? Okay, it is. Install now to this console. Well, someone found a way, if you take the whole thing apart to the point where you have access to the disk tray as you like put the disk in, the moment you hit install, if you're really good with it, you immediately lift up the legit disk and put in your modded burned one down that has like all the modded files in. The Xbox gets tripped up and it would go, well, you had the original disc in, I guess, so you're probably still good with this one, so I'll let you install it still. That's if you just tried to put it in, it wouldn't do it. It would block you from doing it. But if you did that, that was one way. There were so many other mods going on. There were JTags, like just all these different ways. The Xbox 360 modding days were really awesome. It was really fun. But I don't know much about it nowadays. I don't even know if it's still around.
I mean, 6th grade, I was trying to figure out how to double Dutch jump rope. I mean, I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm impressed.
That's it, all because I wanted to be a car in a Call of Duty game.
Wow.
And so I got banned too, actually.
And then from there, how long until you, let's skip the banning and talk about when did you submit your first bug to, any kind of bug bounty program? And then when did you receive your first sort of payment or your first, accolade for a successful bug?
Yep. So the first bug I ever submitted was May of 2016. And
it was a kid who turned himself into a car in Call of Duty. And you're like, he's a cheater. I'm sorry. Keep going.
Well, listen, there was some scenario that did exist like that, but we could skip that part. But yeah, in May of 2016, I submitted my first submission to Yahoo, and it was a duplicate. And then a few weeks later, I still remember it was a subdomain takeover I submitted. And it was like 4 a.m. because I just stayed up all night trying to get it to work. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. It was 7, 8 in the morning, and I woke up early because my little cousins came over and they were loud. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm not going back to sleep now. And it was a hot day too. It was like 100 degrees. And I like woke up to an email that said, hey, thanks for this. Here's $900. And I still remember running downstairs to tell my mom and dad while they were outside with my cousins. And I was like, I just got $900 for hacking this like service. And they couldn't wrap their head around it. They were like, how do you get paid? And I was like, it's PayPal. And they're like, oh, it's fake money then. And I'm like, well, no, it's legit. But yeah, I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was like just finding that first legit vulnerability. It was one of the best feelings in the world. So yep, and then from there, it was a rabbit hole after that.
That was a lot of money for that age, I bet.
Oh yeah. I felt like I was on top of the world.
Were you shouting packs of Pokemon cards to all your friends, or like how'd you blow that $900?
Yeah,
I bought another computer.
Oh, smart man! You invested. You invested back in on yourself.
I bought a gaming laptop with it, and then I used that to find vulnerabilities on Microsoft, starting like 3 months later.
Got it. And so now let's jump forward to February of 2023, and you're presenting on stage at BlueHat, and I was there for your session. I was also had the sort of privilege to see the process by which folks were submitting papers for the conference. This wasn't your only submission for BlueHat. This was one of, was it 3 or 2 that you ended up submitting?
Submitted 2.
You submitted 2. And so this one, can you talk a little bit about the abstract? So how you came up, with the idea, and sort of what's sort of the crux of the session for folks that haven't watched the YouTube video?
Sure. So when I was doing a lot of my full-time bug bounty hunting, I looked for all types of vulnerabilities, but there was a specific one I liked looking for. And, the general term for it is insecure direct object references, or IDOR for short. And under Microsoft and like Google's program, the way a lot of the services are set up, these IDORs kind of turn into cross-tenant scenarios, which can be a little bit dangerous. The scope can be very, very large. So I found a really decent amount of these, right? And I'm not the only one that found these. I know other external researchers that also found these. So what led up to the talk was when I got hired at Microsoft a year and a half ago, Sean Hinchy, I did the talk with him as well. He told me about how he was developing a tool that would basically mimic how I would hunt for these issues. Because I was finding them so consistently, they wanted to try to figure out a way basically how to beat me at finding them. And he went up and talked about that tool and how you could integrate it like in your own CI/CD pipeline to try to find these issues. And I talk about how to find it manually, like in some examples on Google and Microsoft's program of specific like cross-tenant leak issues that were found. And that's kind of like what led to that talk.
So an IDOR, that acronym, that's Insecure Direct Object Reference.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
And in your talk, you show a video of you, I think it's Burp Suite, and you're basically sort of showing what's going on behind the scenes, both in G Suite and I think in some Azure examples. And so this is the type of vulnerability that you would look for first. Is that right? Like whenever you would sort of pick up a new project, or you'd sniff something, you'd start here.
Yep. Whenever I saw a new API or something new that was released, I was testing for an IDOR. But one of the nice things I tell, like a lot of people always ask me, how do I hunt Google? How do I hunt Microsoft? IDORs were about 30% of my submissions, which is a pretty good number. But, that other 70% were submissions just of basic knowledge of the product. They were very, very unique findings. And, maybe someday I'll talk about them. But I always tell people if you really want to hunt down Microsoft and Google, spend a month learning the product before you actually try to find something. Because it'll be really interesting what you can find when you know how the product really interacts with each other.
I know a lot of researchers will just research any company that has a program, and, they'll just go for anything that is available. You focus a lot on Microsoft, and that there must be a reason behind that. Like, what makes the Microsoft program so great for researchers? Like, why so much focus, even from such a young age and until now? Now you're working here as a full-time employee. What are your thoughts on that?
There is a specific story for that. So the first finding I submitted to Microsoft was September of 2016. And it was 2 XSS vulnerabilities. And that was a very good payment. I remember showing my mom that payment, and she was just amazed. And about June of 2017, someone from the Microsoft program reached out to me and they were like, "Hey, are you going to DEF CON this year?" I never even flew on a plane before. I did not want to go. And then I was like, maybe I should go. Like, maybe it's a good idea to go meet individuals at Microsoft. And I ended up going, and it was one of the smartest decisions I ever made. Being around, it's like I was able to meet so many awesome people at the time that I was emailing with directly. And they took me to dinner. They were asking me, like, what are your goals in life? Where do you see yourself? And after that, meeting them, I kind of was like, these are people that I could see myself working with more. So that's kind of like what led me more into like, I want to keep working with these people. I enjoyed spending time with them. I want to see them at future events. And it was a very, very, very good decision.
I agree. I mean, I know myself, I think I'm like the biggest evangelist on like how awesome this company is. And so I'm right there with you. Great company, great team, great people.
100% agree.
And so coming back to the BlueHat session, so this was your first time presenting at BlueHat, or you had presented previously?
First time presenting at BlueHat, and I went to BlueHat back in 2017 one time also, but I didn't present
as an attendee.
Yep.
Got it. And what was your experience at 2017? BlueHat, for listeners of the podcast, it's Microsoft Security Research Conference. It's been going since 2005. We had a bit of a break over COVID, but back for the first in-person in Redmond was just in February of 2023. The Israel event is happening later in March of 2023. But yeah, Cam, your experience as an attendee, and then how similar / different was that being on the presenting side?
There was two big differences. The first one was I was kind of still early in my career, and I remember watching some of the talks and they just flew right over my head. Like I had no idea what I was even listening to. So it really goes to show the growth that happened over the last, 2017, 6 years. That's crazy. To really see as time goes on, how much more knowledge, one can acquire. So that was the first thing. The second thing was, being an attendee at that time was different because it was way different now. Well, speaking was one thing, but also being an employee of Microsoft, just over the years of all the relationships I developed, at the time it was a few individuals that knew me because I had only started hunting on that program or the Microsoft program for like the last, 8 months or whatever. So it was awesome this time around. Like I just knew so many people, and it was just so awesome to like just constantly run into people like, "Hey, how you doing?" Or like someone I've never met before. Like one person I ran into at this last BlueHat, she was a case manager for me 5 years ago. And it was just crazy to run into her and be like, "Do you remember my cases?" And she's like, "I do remember doing some of your cases." And I was like, "That's crazy that I'm finally meeting you." So it was very interesting to like meet old friends that I had worked with years ago that I never met before.
I love being at BlueHat, and you've been on the stage a few times for Strike and for BlueHat. And for those that don't know what Strike is a Microsoft internal security and awareness training program that we have. And Cameron was wonderful on the stage, but seeing him like in the crowd and you see people just flock to you, it's just, you've got such a great personality. It's open. You're happy to share, happy to talk, happy to be on stage and be interviewed. And I think that speaks a lot to your success, both as a researcher, but also as an employee here at Microsoft. You're the whole package of personality, and you're just so open, and we appreciate that. Can't wait to get you back on the stage even more because you're a fan favorite for sure.
I appreciate you including me. I really am thankful for that. So yeah, please invite me more.
Will do.
Absolutely. I think whether you like it or not, you're going to be included in multiple events. I want to come back to the session that you did present. I've got a couple of questions there, but before I do, mention, I sort of hinted there that you submitted two. The one that wasn't accepted, it was less that it sort of wasn't accepted. Just a little sort of, inside baseball here, and more that we sort of ran out of time and space to fit everything in. But it was a really interesting topic that we do want to explore whether it's through the MSRC blog or whether it's through the BlueHat podcast or other avenues. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, Cam? Can I put you on the spot?
Sure. So yeah, there was another submission I sent in, and it was in relation to, a lot of people ask me, why did I stop doing bug bounty hunting full time? I was going strong 6 years and everything was working out. But the problem with bug bounty hunting is there's a little bit of mental health issues with it. The first problem is you are isolated. I get it. Like, HackerOne, for example, will hold events. Blue Hat is an event, but COVID really made it worse because, as a bug bounty hunter, you're already somewhat pretty isolated. And then, HackerOne would have an event maybe every 4 or 5 months or something. And I never went to any of the events, but I knew a lot of bug bounty hunters that did. And that was a way for them to, get out, relax. That's why I loved DEF CON and Black Hat, for example. It was like my vacation essentially. And so bug bounty hunting was already very isolated. And then COVID just took the little hints of time that we had to actually be with other individuals completely away as well. So there's that problem with it. There's, no matter how good you are at it, I could go on a streak of finding a bug a day for an entire month or not finding a bug for an entire month. And both ways would eat you up to the point where okay, well, if I don't find a bug right now, I'm not getting paid. If I'm not getting paid, am I going to be able to survive? Am I not finding bugs because I'm not good enough anymore? Did they fix them all? And other bug bounty hunters I've talked to about this, top ones in other programs, they say the same thing. You find one bug, you feel good for a few hours, and that whole thing just resets. You got to go right back to it. There's no breaks. There's no oh, well, if I am not working right now, I'm not finding bugs. Someone else could be finding them. Is it a duplicate? Is it not a duplicate? You got to have very, very strong mental health to be a full-time bug bounty hunter. And I know a lot of them, I see them on Twitter and they vouch for mental health, but there's some that just remain very, very quiet and they're just very, very into it. And one of the biggest things that always stuck with me was one day, Google also had an event years ago in London where they invited some of their top researchers. And one bug bounty hunter asked me, so how much do you hunt? And I literally told him, I'm every day nonstop. I don't do anything else. And he was like, you're going to burn out. And I was like, no, I'm not. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't worry about me. And I did burn out and it did hit me hard. So yeah, bug bounty and mental health aspect is very, very important. And it's something I try to vouch for a lot because, it will eventually eat you up if you don't pay attention to it.
Especially when you're on Twitter and you see everyone hey, I found this bug, I got paid all this money, and you're just banging your head against your keyboard.
Exactly. I can't tell you how many times I'd find a bug and I'd purposely try to find on Twitter to see if someone else tweeted it and I'm about to get a duplicate. It just is, it's very stressful.
How did you deal with it? How are you sitting here now? What changes have you made? Obviously, a very personal question. So, feel free to be as, you can tell me to shut up if you want to not say this on a podcast. But, you're obviously, as you're sitting here, you're gainfully employed. You seem to be able to put a smile on your face. These are positive things. What changes have you made to address sort of the stress and the burnout that you did encounter and I guess I'm asking in sense of what are your tips and tricks? What would you have talked about in this session had it sort of been presented at the conference?
So the talk was more of a story at first. Essentially, I knew I hit burnout where when I was doing bug bounty, my work was so important to me. That's all I wanted to do. And then one day, eventually, my goal out of bug bounty always was a house. That was always my goal. And then eventually, a couple years ago, I finally got a house. And then it just kind of I don't know, my mind was kind of what's the point now? I've reached the goal out of it. My work ethic was just slowly declining as the weeks were going on. I didn't want to wake up and I basically reached burnout, I was warned about. I didn't want to work. I didn't want to send any bugs in. I didn't want to find any. I was done. I was sick of it. So I was warned. I didn't listen, and it finally hit me.
I mean, that sounds like classic depression too, right? We say, but you say burnout, and obviously that is, but those sound those are the depression symptoms, right? I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to do anything. I've got no motivation for,
no joy.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you feel that burnout in this sense and what we think of as sort of classic depression are the same thing, or at least very similar?
I think they can be correlated. Sometime later in my career, I'll go more deeper into it because there is more involved here. But yeah, I mean, like my work is everything to me. Like I love my work and I love like hunting for vulnerabilities. And yeah, like to see that month of me just not wanting to do anything, it was quite interesting. I was still getting out of bed, don't get me wrong with that, but I didn't even want to open a computer. Like I was just, and even when I was, trying to find issues or something, I was just sitting there like, I'm just sick of this. So essentially what happened was one day I reached out to, so there's someone, my boss, well, not my direct boss. I don't want to drop his name here exactly because I don't know, not really many individuals know who he is, but he's someone that he's basically the way the team I'm on right now, he made it the way it is. Like there's like 14, 15 people on the team I'm on now. Originally it was just him. So me and him go like years back. And one day I emailed him and I was like, hey, we haven't talked in a while. Like, do you want to have a conversation? I don't know. I was just reaching out. You could look at it subconsciously. Something else was probably going on, but it wasn't just a random email probably. So we talked on Teams and the first thing he asks me is, would you like to try for a position? And I've been offered a position before this, but I was always on edge because I wanted to keep doing bounty hunting. I can't tell you how 100% I knew at that moment I was done with bounty hunting and I was ready to move on from it and try for a position at Microsoft. So that was what I did. I knew I had to change something up. There's other options. Some people told me take a break, go on a trip. Vacations, like going on a trip somewhere like that you've never been before, is something that really helps, clear your head. But for me, going to BlueHat, for example, and seeing all of you and like just hanging out with all of you and being at the event and like talking to the crowd and the audience, like that like was enough for me. Like that's a great like mental escape, for example. So that's why like COVID was so tough. Like it just like got rid of you basically already had like mental health problems in the world, and then that just really fueled it. So that's why I'm a really big believer in like being able to see individuals every now and again. So that's something I always employ people to do. Like if you could go to DEF CON, do it. Don't be scared. I was scared at first. My mom literally cried when I was getting on the plane. So do it. You won't regret it. It's a great experience to be able to see other individuals in person. So that's what I always recommend.
What I really appreciate, amongst many things, as you know, Cameron, is you have all this experience. You've been doing this for so long. You have a house from, hunting bugs. I mean, that's huge. And then when we have worked with you, you were so open to feedback. I'm here. I'm going to do a dry run of my presentation. Yes, give it to me. And that I think is a great attribute because you are evolving, you are learning, and you have so much more ahead of you. But it is so appreciative how involved you are and open. Like we're a team. We all work together. We're all working together for Microsoft, and you just absolutely embody that. And again, this is probably why we asked you to speak so many times. But I like that drive of learning and curiosity and just continuously moving forward. So I think you should just keep doing that, and then, be a beacon for those that are also learning to, like you're saying, don't be afraid, get out there. I know that people are going to be listening to this podcast and they're going to, find you on Twitter and maybe ask you some questions because you are an inspiration for sure.
I'm really glad you say that because when I first started bug bounty hunting, I was super arrogant. Like I did not want to hear feedback. I was like, I'm the best at what I do. You can't tell me I'm wrong. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that from you, and other individuals at BlueHat who knew me years ago said the same thing. Like, yeah, you've definitely grown up and I'm proud of you. So I'm very appreciative of that comment for sure.
Plus one to everything Wendy said, and thank you for being that role model. To sort of summarize, thinking about sort of burnout, it sounds like you did a couple things. Sound like you certainly endorse going and being amongst the community. So whether it's DEF CON, whether it's BlueHat, whether it's your local B-sides or hacker meetup, whatever it is, go and be among your like-minded community. It feels like that's a really important step. can that be virtual as well as in person? For folks that might be remote or not comfortable being around other people. Community. Would you agree that that's sort of one of your sort of takeaways here?
Yeah, virtual for sure. Like, participate in forums, anything of that nature. Everybody's different. Like, I like in-person meeting. And for me, like, being able to interact with people in person helps me. But, virtual is the same exact way. A lot of people prefer virtual, and there's nothing wrong with that as well. It's just like, for me, like when I did bug bounty hunting, I didn't want to talk or deal with anyone. This is my findings, my work. I don't want duplicates with anyone. And just that huge amount of isolation will eventually eat you up. So, don't be afraid to, put yourself out there and, interact with the community. I highly encourage it.
And then it sounds like the other thing is you reached out to, maybe you didn't even know why you were reaching out, but you reached out. In this case, it sounds like it was, the person that would eventually become either your hiring manager or your current manager, but you reached out to someone that you had a sort of a mentorship relationship. Would that be right? Or is that like, again, I'm trying to work out how would you turn this into advice for folks listening to the podcast?
I'll just be clear about it. Like, I wasn't reaching out because I was trying to have a coffee chat with him. Like, I knew what was going on. My subconscious was definitely trying to get out of the situation I was in. So me and this specific person, we've spoken numerous times throughout the years. And this was a very, like I said, he offered me positions before, like to try for some, jobs. And I always was on the edge because I wanted to keep doing bounty hunting at the time. But I'm almost positive my subconscious was doing this, saying, I hope he offers me a position because I can't take this anymore and I want to get out. So, And then I started about 3 months after that, and I was very, very happy about it.
In the same vein of advice for folks out there that are listening, if someone is listening and wants to get into bug bounty hunting or just security in general, and they have no idea where to begin, what would you say the first step would be? I mean, obviously going in, there's some obvious, educational paths, but, what is something that you see from your perspective as the most effective beginning?
So the way I learned was I read public disclosure reports that other finders were finding. And you can go find these on like GitHub or HackerOne. I know there's books on Amazon also really help, like buying books. But for me, reading how services directly were actually vulnerable to issues really was the best way to learn. Like, how did this individual do this to a certain company? And you can literally look up like bug bounty public disclosures, online, and you'll find a huge chunk of, there's probably even more now than when I was reading them years ago. So that was the biggest way, like learn from how all these other top individuals were finding stuff. And then from there, you'll kind of develop your own strategies and methods of how to do it as well. That's what helped me.
That probably also helps you learn how to format your report that you submit when you do find a bug.
Include a video. That's another big advice. Make videos with your reports. That's always, I would always include videos because whenever I would submit something and they had questions, I got sick and tired of answering questions. So I'm like, listen, I'm just going to include videos also now. And that was like a huge deal, like adding a video.
I feel like we could do another podcast episode just on sort of best practices for submitting a bug bounty, because it's sort of ironic that the way that you said, like, I got sick and tired of answering the questions from my case manager, so I just recorded a video of me going through the whole thing. And what you stumbled upon was actually maybe the best practice for how to submit a bug. So we might sort of table that one, Cam, to talk about at another time. But Wendy, to your question, and Cam, when I listened to your BlueHat session, I was standing on the side, listening to you present. And then obviously shout out to Sean Hinchy as well, who was your co-presenter. I loved that your session, while both of you are Microsoft employees, you were essentially telling the two sides of the story. You were telling sort of the vulnerability hunter, the hacker, the red team side, and then Sean was telling sort of the blue team side through the lens of some of these bugs that you found. You talk about some of the techniques that you use. You talk about Burp Suite, and you talk about how you go about sniffing out some of these IDOR. What is it? It's not a credential. It's an object, right? That is
object IDs.
An object ID. And so I think if anyone wants to dip their toe in the water, they could really just sort of go and watch the YouTube recording of your session and get some ideas of maybe how to start. You can download a free version of Burp Suite, I think, and you can just sort of start playing around with it. Are there any tutorials that you would recommend, or any YouTube channels, or any folks on Twitter? Or is Burp Suite a great place to start, or is that a little maybe too advanced?
If you want to get into web application hacking, you will need to learn Burp Suite, in my opinion. It is a very essential tool. I will say this, the free version is very, very good, and to the point where that was the only version I used when I did my bug bounty hunting. So it is a very, very good version. There were times I wish I had the professional one. I just, kind of worked my way around it and did something manually. But it is funny you say that. Someone recently I met was like, I kind of want to do what you do. How do I learn? And I literally have been referencing that talk, saying, if you want to see some exact submissions and tutorials, go watch the talk. I show you exactly how I was doing it. So yes, the talk is another great area to learn. Now,
without giving away the talk, or at least without giving away the ending of the talk, was Sean and team successful in creating a tool, a process, a way to automate some of the findings that you were submitting so consistently?
Yep, it does work. And he gives examples of this, but one of the best examples I think we had is when we were working on it together one time, like a year ago. He ran it against this one product, and it said this one area was vulnerable. And I was confused because I was like, that's not true. I already found that area. I reported it. It was fixed. It's done. And then we're like, okay, let's go take another look at it. And it was vulnerable again. There was a regression. So, it helped us find an area that was fixed, and then the issue came back. So yes, there are working proof of concepts with the tool. It's an awesome tool. Sean did an amazing job on it.
Did he name it after you?
Yeah. Is it called the secretly hidden tool? Is it called Vincentovia 3000?
You know what? I should have made a bigger hassle about that, because it's not. It's called generator and correlator. But yeah, I guess you're right. It should have been named after me.
It was your moment.
Maybe you could rename your online presence as generator correlator, and then you can sort of claim that linkage. It's sort of like a backronym.
I could do that as well. Some ideas here.
Cameron, I want to ask you a question that has nothing to do with bug bounty, nothing to do with security. What does Cameron like to do when he's not hunting bugs or doing anything security related? What else? What's the other side of Cameron? What do you like?
I like video games to an extent, not as much as when I was a kid. I like cars. I have some very, very close friends that aren't really in InfoSec. So I like to spend time with them, hang out with them a lot. It really is most of my weeks are, I like to kind of like be in the zone and then work. And that's one reason I love being at Microsoft, is they're very big on vouching, like, listen, if you're off the clock, be off the clock. Because that was the problem with bug bounty, right? Like, I don't want to be off the clock. I want to keep working. And eventually that, explodes. And that's on the weekends. I'll spend time with my friends. I just kind of relax. Maybe I'll read a book about other types of different, things related to cybersecurity. But for me, it's all about, like, I'm big on like relaxing and, just clearing your mind. It's very, very important.
Sounds like you've found the perfect balance since before.
Yeah. Before it was work. Don't talk to me. I don't have anything to do with you. If I'm not working, that's all it is.
Well, I think we're coming up on time. Cam, you've been incredibly generous with us. Again, you had a great talk at BlueHat 2023 in partnership with Sean Hinchy, and a big shout out to Sean. We'll get Sean on the podcast one day, and we'll put that link in the show notes. You can go to YouTube. You can search for BlueHat 2023. You can search for Cameron Vincent if you want to go find it. It's a great session. Cam, where can we find you online? What are you up to next that you want to sort of promote? And or is, anything you would like folks to reach out to you about if they want to learn more or have continue the discussion?
I always tell individuals, if you have any questions, always reach out to me on Twitter. My DMs are open. I love talking about this stuff. No, I'm not going to hack, your ex-girlfriend's Facebook. But if you have questions about bug bounty specifically, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it. And if you, especially with like mental health and bug bounty, the best advice I can say is, like, if you're really struggling with it, take a break. You have to. Like people told me to take a break and I did not listen. You have to turn your computer off, push the battery out, do something, because it will catch up to you for sure.
And if people have questions about that, you're cool with them pinging you on Twitter to have a conversation? I
have no issue with it.
That is very generous of you. Thank you, Cam. And then what's next for you? Are you going to be talking at any conferences coming up? You got any blog posts in the work? What can you talk about?
So there's, always doing interesting research and hopefully future conferences for sure. It's difficult getting, some conferences are very competitive, but yes, keep a lookout on my Twitter, and I always tweet anything that I'll be talking about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cam, for joining us. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. I can't wait. I think we actually have another event, an internal event that you're going to be participating on. So we love you for that. And we look forward to having you on the next time. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for the Blue Hat Podcast.
If you have feedback, topic requests, or questions about this episode,
please email us at bluehat@microsoft.com or message us on Twitter at MSFTBlueHat.
Be sure to subscribe for more conversations and insights from security researchers and responders across the industry
by visiting BlueHatPodcast.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.